Hey guys, Lonewolf here, and today I got a video for you about microphones. Now this might seem like a bit of a strange topic for a gaming YouTuber to cover, but I actually think that the importance of being able to communicate clearly with your teammates is really underrated. Now I'm going to focus specifically on Skype, TeamSpeak, and the in-game Counter-Strike VOIP. These are really the three that I use most of the time. I use TeamSpeak with my friends, I use Skype with my friends, and I will use the Counter-Strike in-game one to communicate with random teammates. And I'm going to tell you how to set these all up and how to get a good microphone level, and just some tips for trying to eliminate as much background noise as possible. Just get your audio clarity as good as it can be. Obviously, buying a more expensive mic usually does yield better audio quality, but there's a lot you can get out of cheap microphones that many people don't because they just don't know how to set them up. Now, just to start off with, my basic philosophy is that both input and output amplitude, that's volume, should be set manually. I really can't stand applications that automatically adjust your levels. It messes with me so often, I just want to turn all of these things off. Now, Skype does this, TeamSpeak does this, and Counter-Strike does this in an incredibly obnoxious way, which is just to turn your microphone level all the way up by default. Really can't stand these things. So the first part of this tutorial is just going to show you how to turn those things off, because you really don't want them messing with your level. What you want to do is get the right level set up so you know it's in the right place, and that way when you're dealing with other people on TeamSpeak or Skype or whatever, if they say you're too loud or you're too quiet, then that's really a problem on their end. You know that you are at the right level. You are delivering your audio to them at the level at which, say, a song or a movie would be. So you don't need to worry about your microphone being adjusted to such a point where it's introducing huge amounts of background noise that you don't know about just because Skype has decided on that occasion it's going to turn it up. So starting first with Skype, this is the options menu here, and you need to go down to the audio settings. You can get to this menu by going to the toolbar at the top, then going Tools, Options. Alternatively, you could click Control and Comma. I'm not going to show you the main Skype window and how to get here exactly because I'd like to preserve the privacy of my contacts. Now there are these two checkboxes, one for the microphone, one for the speakers. Uncheck both of these, and once that's done, Skype no longer has permission to change these levels for itself. It has to stick with whatever you give it. Moving on to TeamSpeak here, you go to Settings, then Options, and go down to the Capture tab. From here, you'll see down the bottom, there is the option to go for Advanced Options, make that appear, and then Automatic Voice Gain Control. Turn this one off. This is the automatic adjustment. Now, there are some other options here, which I'll just discuss briefly. First of all, you have Push to Talk, Continuous Transmission, or Voice Activation Detection. Continuous transmission is terrible. It means everyone can hear you all the time. Please don't use this one. Voice activation detection is okay if you don't have particularly bad background noise. Push to talk is obviously fine, but it does have the drawback of you needing to press a key every time you want to speak. Now, you have echo reduction and echo cancellation. I guess these could be fine. You can experiment for yourself to see whether these sound better. But for me personally, I found it just makes my audio quality sound worse. If you have quite a good microphone, I think you'll find these just make it sound a little bit washed out, makes it sound a little bit underwater. So I'm not a big fan of those. The same thing goes for remove background noise. I don't like this option very much. Now, when it comes to voice activation detection, I'll come back to this a bit later because you really only want to adjust this threshold once you've found the correct level for your mic. Likewise, before you can resolve Counter-Strike's automatic adjustment, you need to get the correct setting for your microphone. The first part of this is microphone placement. Now, if you have some sort of integrated solution like into a laptop or a webcam, there's probably not a whole lot you can do about this. But if you have a mic on a boom arm like I do, then you want to try and get it as close to your mouth as possible. Now, 6 inches is recommended. I wouldn't recommend you go any closer than that, although it can be used for recording. You probably don't want to be trying for the proximity effect while you're actually in game. Chances are you're going to raise your voice at some point, and if it was at an appropriate level while you're speaking normally, then it's probably going to clip when you shout or when you scream or whatever it is you do in game. So keep it at least 6 inches away from your mouth and try and get it as close as possible. A lot of these guides online that show you correct microphone placement are going to assume that you can put the mic directly in front of you, which when you're gaming you really can't because your monitor needs to be able to be seen. So you're going to want to put it to the left or right or below or above. Now, I know for some people who are using desk mics, they like to put the mic between themselves and the keyboard. I found this ergonomically quite uncomfortable, so I wouldn't recommend that, but it may be something you want to try out if you have no other option. For me, I put the microphone to my left on the arm, and that tends to work about right. It's probably around 6 to 9 inches away from my mouth. It tends to work pretty well. Likewise for polar pattern, I recommend cardioid. For those people to whom this is applicable, you're probably going to know a lot of this anyway. It's probably going to be quite elementary. Now, if you're using a headset mic, as a lot of people are, on a gaming headset, or maybe you bought something like an Antlion mod mic, then you want to put that microphone just to the side of your mouth, whereby the edge of your mouth is pretty much in in line with the tip of the microphone. You don't want that microphone directly in front of your mouth. That's not the best placement for it. As I said before, if you're using some sort of webcam integrated solution, there's not a whole lot you can do. The reason you want to try and get your mouth as close to the microphone as possible without it distorting is that you want to be able to cut out background noise. You do this by turning down the microphone input level, and you can only do this so far as you can still be heard. So obviously the closer you are to the microphone, the lower this can go while you're still audible. Now that you've got microphone placement as good as it can get, it's time to find the right input level for your mic. The way I recommend you do this is to download Audacity. You can get this from their website. Just click that and follow the instructions to download and install, and then open up a new session. From here, all you need to do is just try and establish a baseline, what you're working with by default. So hit record and you'll be able to see the waveform up on screen here, and down at the bottom, for me, I've got these little level meters. Now, by default, I think this is up here somewhere, but it's really small and you can really only see notches rather than numbers to indicate what level you're hitting. So I dragged it down the bottom where you can see it on a much larger scale. Now, if you look down there, I'm not going to hover over this because it'll make a tooltip pop up, but the red line there just shows the peak for the last 3 to 5 seconds. And then the blue one is the maximum peak for this entire recording. You can see that they're staying between about -12 and -3 decibels while I'm speaking. This is pretty much what you want to aim for. -6 is ideal. It's what I use to master for all my YouTube recordings for. That's pretty much the best level I find. But anywhere between -12 and -3 is fine, and particularly if you're speaking quite quietly in the evening, -12 is just about fine. What you really don't want is to go above this or below this. So if it is below this, you need to turn your microphone up. Just drag it upwards, and if it's too high, then you need to turn it down. What you really don't want to be doing is having it go up to 0. If it hits 0, it's going to do what we call clipping, and that really doesn't sound nice. Just to demonstrate exactly why you mustn't leave it at 100% and just think it'll be fine, I'm going to turn mine all the way up. This was default for me, so as soon as I plugged in my microphone, this is what Counter-Strike set it to. It's just not great. I'll show you now. And here you can see that this is really going to distort. I'm clipping now, I'm hitting that 0 decibel mark, and it just distorts my voice. It sounds awful. It's much more difficult for people to understand me if I'm hitting this, particularly if I'm getting much closer to the mic. I'm even louder than I was a second ago. Really not very pleasant, and you'll see that the waveform here is much more erratic. Now, likewise, another problem with having it too high, if I push the mic away from me, it'll actually be the correct volume for my voice, but I'm going to pick up much more background noise because it's further away and because the mic level has to be higher in order to hear me properly. So if I shut up, you'll be able to hear probably the PC fans, and then I'll hit some keystrokes so you can see what that sounds like as well. So yeah, not very pleasant at all. I'm going to turn it back down. So if I come back down to my normal volume, which is 80%, it's much, much nicer. And if I now hit some keystrokes, you aren't going to hear it quite as clearly. However, you also don't want to be taking the level too low. If I turn it down too far, you're really going to struggle to hear me. Might be good for background noise, but it's not so great if you want people to actually hear me. And if I take it all the way down to 25%, it's almost impossible to hear exactly what I'm saying over the sound of gunshots or even ambient background noise in a video game, say the sound of a tank engine. Now that I brought it back up to 80%, this is what I use. It probably won't be exactly the same for all of you, but some of you might find this is the right level. And once you have found this level, you really don't need to do much more than that. Now that your applications are set not to interfere, it's not going to be a problem. This is just going to stay where it is. This actually adjusts the level in Windows. So if I go down here to recording devices, you'll be able to see all your inputs here. Double click on my microphone, go to levels, you'll see it's at 80%. And if I adjust this, you'll see up in Audacity that it changes it as well. So just set it to whatever it is you need to get between -12 and -3, and then you're pretty much done. You can stop the recording. You can also listen back on what you sound like, so you can go back to the beginning, you can play this. I'm not going to do this because it'll really mess up the recording, but you can listen to what you sound like, see whether it sounds okay. Providing it looks something like this, it probably will do, but you might just want to check and see whether it sounds particularly bizarre for any reason. Some pieces of software can really interfere with this. Likewise, electromagnetic interference from inside your PC can really cause problems with this, so just make sure there's no whine, no coil whine in the background. Once you've done that, you're pretty much done finding the right level, and all you really need to do now is set up Counter-Strike if that's what you're going to do. Now from here, just go into your program files, x86, find Steam, and from there Steam Apps, Common, go down to Counter-Strike Global Offensive, open CSGO, CFG, and then find the config. From here, open it up in Notepad and just search for mixer. Now from here, you'll be able to see there's a couple of options. And this one here, voice mixer volume, set at 0.8. Essentially, this just controls what Counter-Strike is going to boost it up to. By default, this is set to 1, which is 100%. 0.8 is 80%, 0.5 is 50%, so on and so forth. So just set it to what you want to, file, save, and you're done. Now I said I'd come back to TeamSpeak's voice activation detection. Now that you've configured your microphone level, if provided you did it similarly to how I suggested, you're probably going to find you don't need to change it too far off this. What you want this to do for you is make sure that whenever you're speaking, your voice is going to be transmitted to everyone else on the TeamSpeak server, and that when you stop speaking, it's not going to transmit your background noise or your keystrokes. Now, when I begin the test, you'll see that all the time I'm speaking normally at my normal speaking volume, it's always peaking above that threshold. And this little indication here is always lit up to show me that it would be transmitting if I was connected to a server. So this is a good level. You don't want to have it too high or you won't be able to be heard. People will only hear part of a message or none of it at all. And you don't want it too low because if you do, you'll find that when you aren't speaking, it's still going to be transmitting. You can see that blue light there is still on. The real difficulty for gamers is trying to get the right balance when you're using a mechanical keyboard, or really any keyboard. That's the real problem. Now for me, if I set it to about -15, I can still actually pick up my keyboard clicks. So I have to set it higher than that so that it's only going to pick up my voice when I'm speaking. Obviously, when you are speaking, it's going to be able to pick up the whole range, keyboard clicks, PC fans, all of that stuff, but you're going to be talking over the top of it and it's really not going to matter. So aside from to say that if you're talking into a microphone at close distance, you should probably also be using a pop filter, that's pretty much the end of this tutorial. If everyone adhered to this standard, it'd be much easier to communicate clearly with other people online. You wouldn't end up in so many situations where you have to manually turn up one person in TeamSpeak, turn down another, or where you have to ask somebody else to adjust their microphone. You'd just be able to set a level for your TeamSpeak client or for Skype, and then another one for your music or your game or whatever it is you're having playing concurrently. It'd be much simpler, and I really do think that people need to take a moment just to make sure their microphone is configured properly. If you do, everyone else does. It's just going to make for a much more pleasant experience online. And with that, thank you very much for watching what has been quite an unusual video for me. I hope you enjoyed, found it useful, interesting. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time.